plenty to cover. Let's bring in my panel now. Daily Telegraph National Affairs Editor and host of the US Report here on Sky News, James Morrow. And Pauline Hanson's Chief of Staff, James Ashby. Well, welcome to you both. I'll start, of course, with the biggest story in the world yesterday. I think pretty much the biggest story again today, the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. It's still leading headlines globally. James Morrow, first to you. A defiant Donald Trump. He's landed in Milwaukee. He fully intends to speak at the Republican National Convention this week. It's just a day after being shot in Pennsylvania. He's not officially due to speak until Thursday. That's when he'll formally accept the Republican nomination. But at the last convention, he broke tradition and turned up on day one. So anything's possible. And I think after yesterday's assassination attempt, I mean, we're in uncharted territory, aren't we? What do you expect?
Well, we're in completely uncharted territory, Peter, and one thing I'll note is that in an exclusive interview with Selena Zito, Donald Trump said that he's basically torn up his entire speech that he was due to give on Thursday night, Friday, midday our time at that convention, and he wants to give a speech that is all about bringing the country together, and he spoke very, movingly about how he sees himself in this moment, and I think that we saw in the wake of that assassination attempt and the way he basically pushed himself up and essentially forced his Secret Service agents to stop and let him reassure the crowd. I think we saw a Trump that has convinced a lot of people that he is, in fact, the real deal, that he's not just somebody who talks tough on TV, but that he's actually, somebody with quite a formidable character. And now I think going into this convention, he's not at all cowed. Instead, he's completely galvanized, I think, to spread his message and his vision for America. So, we may see him early in the convention, but he's also a showman, so he knows that keeping him waiting is also sometimes a good move.
James, I made that point in my editorial. I mean, the composure to do that, the presence of mind to know that you need to reframe that narrative, reframe that shot. It's not, an old man hustled away. It's a defiant leader. I think that was extraordinary, and I think we are going to see something extraordinary in the next couple of days in Milwaukee. Questions to you, James Ashby, being asked today regarding the Secret Service. Not only, how did a shooter get so close to the president, but it seems that there were people in the audience marking out the young man, the 20-year-old Thomas Crooks, on the rooftop, warning police. There were certainly armed police there, as well as the Secret Service. There's going to now be a review, but the Biden camp, the Democrats, they are under a lot of pressure for their rhetoric, aren't they?
Yeah, they sure are, and if anyone ever questioned whether there was such a thing as a God, I think the answer is now known, and you can also tell which side God's on, because this was a significant event which occurred over the weekend, and of course there should be questions asked about the security. More footage came out today which indicated that people were trying to get the attention of the police that were standing at the back there, and trying to say there is a shooter, there is somebody on that roof that should be looked into, because at the end of the day, I think it was only those people at the back that probably distracted that shooter, because let's keep in mind, he was only about 100 metres away from Trump, who was on that stage. It wasn't a tough shot. I think he was rattled, and as a result, he missed the shot.
James, I want to get your comment on this tweet I picked up today. 100 million pissed off Republicans, it says. 0 cities destroyed. It's worth commenting, isn't it, that unlike the left, there's been no riots, there's been no looting. Can you only imagine what might have happened if that was Biden at the lectern?
Yeah, and Peter, I think it's a really sad reflection of the state of the left, but anybody who's lived through the last 4 years, the last 8 years, and watched America closely knows exactly what this person is talking about. We know that in 2020 we had all of the riots around Black Lives Matter and Antifa. We've seen civil unrest at the 2017 inauguration of Donald Trump. And here you have an act of political violence, apparent political violence, aimed at the Republican candidate for president to take him out of the race and take him off of this planet, quite literally. And you know what? Everybody has been quite calm about it, and there's been no calls for retribution. There's been no calls for, division. And I think that speaks to the character of Trump's supporters. And you can only imagine, though, and we've seen this before, whenever the left is disappointed or upset by something, the first thing they do is they call out the goon squad. And this is where we are in politics. And where does Joe Biden go, saying, well, we've got to bring the country together, but, it's his side that's so often responsible for tearing it apart.
Well, just stay on that theme. Here's a tweet from Conservative commentator C.J. Pearson, and it reads, "The assassin who tried to take the life of President Trump and successfully took the life of a father of two was 20 years old. We need to have a serious conversation about what the radical left's indoctrination of my generation is doing to our mental health." James Ashby.
Well, there's a lot here that obviously social media is doing to people. Social media is whipping up a frenzy, not just in the United States, but right across the globe. And I think, Peter, you and I are old enough and we've seen enough politics in our time to have seen discontent in other parts of the world. I remember in '96, after I just finished high school, being over in Indonesia when Megawati was trying to run there, and there were riots and a whole heap of things going on there. But let's not forget, we've seen some pretty outrageous things. It's only that social media wasn't around back in '96 when Pauline Hanson first came to Parliament. She was having protesters that were bussed in by the Labor Party and by some of the universities across the country, filling condoms with urine and faeces and throwing eggs at those people who went to support her at halls and different venues that were hosting her talks. It could have been a whole lot worse back then. Thankfully it wasn't. But this sort of behaviour, if you're on the wrong side of politics, unfortunately, those on the left love to attack you. And they're often the ones that are violent, and it's been exacerbated by social media because people love to see their name in lights and people love to see their actions put across the whole globe. In other words, gone viral.
We'll come back to the Republican convention in a moment. We'll cross live to the US, but I might add my husband Brian's there. He's leading a delegation of centre-right politicos from all around the world. I spoke with him earlier in the day. I asked him about the security. He said at the last convention the security was tight, as tight as he'd ever experienced, but he said getting through into the venue today was next level. He said, "I've never seen anything like it." We'll cross in a moment, as I said, to Brad Palumbo out of Washington, D.C. But let's go back home. Plenty of panic amongst the Greens with revelations that the Muslim vote movement could cost them the prized target seat of Wills in inner-city Melbourne and votes in the Senate. The Greens have reportedly told the Muslim vote to leave Wills alone, get out of the way of them in the Senate, and instead to focus solely on the lower house. James Morrow. Surely the Greens don't think that their policies of transgender rights and drug reform will resonate with Muslim voters.
Well, I mean, I'm sorry, I really do kind of have to laugh here because it feels like things are accelerating so quickly on this whole competition between the Greens and the Muslim vote people. And, it's so funny because the Greens are just completely, they've stepped on a rake here with their whole, you could call it the Queers for Palestine problem here that they've got. They say, oh, look, we're both real lefties on Gaza and so on. But, of course, as you suggest, the Greens' policies on everything for a socially conservative movement, like the Muslim vote, well, that's not going to have any trucking. I don't think the Muslim vote are going to have any sort of tolerance for saying, oh, no, okay, well, that's fine. We'll leave that over there for you to the Greens. No. These guys are about power, and just watch. This is going to be real popcorn-worthy stuff.
Yeah, it is getting fascinating. Hey, just 8 weeks on after he handed down the federal budget, the Treasurer's out there today, James, saying that the budget surplus he forecast is about 50% bigger. Now, this he'll say it's a good thing. This will give Labor more money to spend come the election campaign. But, I mean, 2 months on, how could these budget costings be so off the mark?
Well, this just again demonstrates whatever modelling they're using is often out. And there has to be some resistance here by Labor not to go out and spend this money as the Greens would have them do. I heard in the last week of sitting in the Senate there, the Greens saying, you've got all this money left over as a surplus, go out and spend it. No, that is not the purpose of a surplus, especially given the volume of debt that this country's in, and especially given the warnings that the RBA have given, and that is that if the governments across this country continue with their reckless spending, their continuation of these reckless handouts, what we're going to see is punishment when it comes to interest rates, and that is going to be felt by every single homeowner and every person that might be out there renting, because there's more chance that those people in a rental property, it's probably financed as well by the owner. So there has to be some fiscal discipline here shown by Labor. Well, it's a good sign they've got they've got this added surplus, but be disciplined with it.
And just quickly, James, because I know, James Ashby, you've sat in the chamber and you've watched swearing-ins as I have. I watched the swearing-in the British Parliament. Keir Starmer and a good proportion of his cabinet didn't swear an oath on the Bible or another holy book. They all ran with the secular affirmation. Nigel Farage, I might add, swore an oath on a Bible. That's very much what Labor do here now. Well, certainly that's my experience in the past. Did you notice this?
Yeah, I did. The English have had this in for a lot longer than Australia. Of course, swearing and affirmation came in when we formed the Federation, and that was 1901. But gradually, I noticed over the 60s and 70s, that's when there's been an ultimate shift to the affirmation, particularly by Labor, and more so in the Senate than the lower house here. And strangely enough, in England, they've been allowing the affirmation since the 1600s. I think it was an act of tolerance that was passed over there. So, bit of history for you.
It always helps me identify where people stand, particularly on the so-called conservative side with that one.
Yeah, I agree.
James Ashby, James Morrow, thank you very much.